Hey, I want to welcome our newest sponsor, Antonio Nicholson from Nicholson Law. This former state place winner from Solon High School and captain of the Cleveland State University team is a attorney that handles criminal cases, everything from minor misdemeanors to felonies of the first degree. He also does custody, civil, and personal injury cases, and he's been doing this for 6 years. He's a former public defender, and his motto is always and forever protector of the people. He wants to offer a 10% discount to all athletes, former and present, if they retain his services. Nicholson Law at 216-774-4774. That's 216-774-4774. Antonio Nicholson, Nicholson Law. Blood Time, the podcast that speaks to the bond, the emotion between coach and athlete at the interscholastic and intercollegiate level. Each interview, each segment will reveal that bond and what was learned, how they were transformed, and what each athlete took to the world at large from that transformation. These stories will warm your heart and astound you altogether. Submitted for your approval. Now it is blood time. Well, we're back. This is Coach Cimoroni, Blood Time. I'm back with part 2, our first part 2 in the history of Blood Time with Dr. Scott Peters. Welcome, Dr. Scott.
Oh, I feel welcome. Thank you, Peter.
Absolutely.
It's great to be here.
We want to get in. We obviously discussed your formative years with the Pin Squad and the iconic Longwood Y, and of course the Beechwood experience with Coach Cimoroni. We love Coach I. That then transitioned you into a situation where you wrestle initially for the University of Toledo and eventually for Ohio State University, the Ohio State University Buckeyes. Let's talk a little bit about that and how that transformed you from not only now a man, but a man to an adult, a fully formed adult, and how that process and sometimes tough process transformed.
There was interest in me when I was a senior. Actually, when I was a junior. Okay. I gotten some standard form letters. Okay. By the time I was a senior, I had accomplished. I had some good victories under my belt, and so things were
notable
going
wins.
Well. Yeah, and then I ended up making state and wrestling all the way to the state finals, and I wrestled a kid that I had pinned in the district championship. I won't even mention his name because I won't give him the sass. But no,
I love it.
No, he was a very tough wrestler. So I pinned him in the district championship, and then he beat me in overtime in the state championship.
Sure.
That promotes growth also.
Of course.
And so it was the worst day of my life. And I remember thinking in the hotel room afterward, it ruined my whole career, meaning my whole career was not worth it. I would have been better off not having wrestled than to have had it end that way.
Wow.
And I was inconsolable. I was in a bad place just for that night.
And I would say the vast majority of second place finishers feel the same way. Yeah.
I think the ones that didn't expect to get there, they might have a different
story.
Right. But if you expected to win it,
yep.
And I had every reason to believe I was going to win it.
Of course.
Right. Then I lost to Friedel, and not to make any excuses, but I was sick as a dog when I woke up that morning. They told me that I had shingles. Oh boy! The overtime didn't help. Coach I told the story, but I won't repeat it. But it was an interesting. He thinks I still hold him accountable for the loss because he didn't slap me again in the face or get in my face in the corner. Instead, he's like, "You're wrestling good. You got this one. You got this one." Yeah. Right. Whereas in the sectional championship, I went in overtime, and he went absolutely berserk on me. He screamed at me in front of everybody, right? Yeah. And he fired me up. Yeah. But anyways, it wasn't his fault. It was my fault. I just didn't win the match. And so make sure we got that clear now. Right. That was a difficult time for me. Right. And so, I think I only spend the next 10 years re-wrestling that match 4 or 5 times a day, every single day.
Of course.
My dream was to kind of follow in David Sternberg's path, another guy that I looked up to.
Sure, 2-time state champ.
Probably still do. His thing was he left high school wrestling and he hung up his shoes and he never wrestled again.
Right.
It didn't end as clean cut as he thought it was going to, because later I recruited him to get back into coaching, and so we brought him back on the staff. But so when I lost, though, that wasn't part of the plan, and so now I had all these unanswered questions, and I had these
plus you
unsettled,
were growing. Plus you really
physically
just grew an
Well,
immense amount.
I really didn't start growing till my senior year.
Right. I mean, when you came back from college, you were just a different physical specimen.
I learned some lessons from those defeats, and I felt like I had some unsettled business, and so took 5 official visits to different places.
Right.
And we got all done, and okay, so I didn't have a clear picture of where I wanted to go. And the last place we visited was the University of Toledo.
Yes.
That year they had the best team in Ohio.
Okay.
Right. It was a gorgeous sunny day. The campus was really nice. It was the best kept secret in Ohio as far as I was concerned. Arizona State was a possibility, and my parents told me that if you go, you'll be able to. I asked them how often I would be able to come home, and they told me twice.
Right. Yeah.
And that they would come out once.
Okay.
So, and I had a little brother that I was crazy about.
Of course.
So that wasn't really an option. I said, I'm going to see my brother 3 times in a year. Are you kidding me? So that wasn't a real option for me. And even though that was my favorite place. And then when I got done doing all the math and all the calculations, so I said, I guess I'll go here, right, to Toledo.
Yeah.
And the coach was a nice guy. And, he looked more like a basketball player than a wrestler. And I didn't know any wrestling credentials he had. But he was a good salesman.
Right.
And so I
usually are.
I ended up in that room. And again, I found myself right back at Longwood where I couldn't even buy a takedown.
Yes.
And so that didn't last very long. And I left. I retired probably a month into the season. And then I wrestled in the intramural tournament. And in the finals, I wrestled a kid who was a big-time recruit for Toledo, and he started for them. And I think he made nationals a couple times before he was ineligible. He just wasn't a good student. And he kind of disappeared, failed out of school, showed up back in school, and he wrestled in the tournament. And everybody knew him and respected him. He was friends with the older kids because he was older. Yeah. Older kids on the team. Yeah. So I wrestled him in the finals, and I whipped them. All the kids on the team, they were refereeing the tournament.
Yes.
So they all came up to me and said, you really need to come back out. The coach came up to me and said, you need to come back out. And so eventually I ended up going back out for the team the next year. Right. And really rededicated myself and felt like, I could do this. And, some of those kids that were 50 or seniors graduated. It was a much more manageable situation for me and for my ego.
Yeah. So maybe you needed to take that year off.
I probably did, but I always wonder how much growth I would have had if I had stayed in the room and just taken those lumps, Yes. But somehow a little bit of the fire
I don't know.
was gone.
Sometimes you get refreshed, both physically and mentally.
Agreed.
And I've seen that where, even during the day, sometimes you just need to take a walk just to get away from stuff because you just get beat down sometimes. Right. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing the point on this, but I don't know if I am or not.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think when I was in college, my coach was Russ Hellickson, and Russ said that, one of the things that made Dan Gable so unusual and unique and successful was the fact that he felt like most people do need a little bit of a break from time to time to recharge their batteries and emotionally regroup. And he said, Dan doesn't ever need that. Yeah. I went back out for wrestling. I was a recruit, but really I didn't have any money here, at this point. And so I had to wrestle off one of the seniors, and he was a great kid. His name was Phil Plummer. And, and I beat him out. And wow. Yeah. And he was a very popular kid because he was very grounded. He was just a very decent guy. I mean, he was a super nice guy. And at Toledo, I got my first taste of a little bit of anti-Semitism. Gotcha. I didn't even know that existed really. Right. And so
Beechwood is a very insular community for the Jewish person.
Right. So
I was the exact opposite. Feeling.
You were.
Yeah. So I understood that. Yeah. That's how we used to fight in Beechwood.
What was words?
It was absolute how insulting you could be to the other person.
Right. Well, it wasn't physical.
That was our fisticuffs.
Right. Yeah, so I had become acutely aware of the fact that there were some kids on the team that
didn't like the Jews.
Well, didn't like this Jew. I didn't know about any other Jews.
Okay.
Right. And again, maybe I was a little cockier than I should have been. I don't know. I don't remember how I was, but I did. But
it was an easy target.
I did feel it.
Okay. Was it an easy target?
Probably.
Okay.
I mean, I had a roommate, and he should rest in peace. He died prematurely. I didn't know that he passed away until a couple of years ago, but he and I had a major brawl one day in our room. And I can tell you that I whooped him right now. He was bigger than me. He was 3 weight classes bigger, but I can tell you I whooped him because he's dead and he can't defend himself.
Okay.
But
that man tells no lies.
Right, right. So, but right now he's going, you better not say it. You know? So, but anyways, we had a fight, and he said, you know why that bothers you? Yeah. And he's like in my face, and I'm in his face. And he said, you know why that bothers you? And I said, tell me why it bothers me. Yeah. And he said, because you're a Jew. Yeah. And I said, really? Yeah. I said, you think any of this, right, that's been going on between us, you think any of that is based on anything Jewish? Yeah. Right. Wow. And at the time I was a completely irreligious Jew. I had virtually no connection. Yeah. Secular at best. Right. And so I wasn't, I didn't exude Jewish.
Right. Right.
There were some difficulties there, and it was a little bit uncomfortable. I had a drill partner who was best friends with the kid I beat out.
Oh boy. Yeah.
And I looked up to him. Oh, his name was Steve Fairbanks. I looked up to him. He was this great looking kid. He was fast. He was such a good wrestler. He never knew how good he was. Yeah. If he would have known how good he was, there's no telling what he could have done. And if he would have had a workout partner that was better than me. But anyways, so, those were some tough times, but I was in the starting lineup. I felt like I had to beat Phil Plummer in a wrestle-off like every 10 minutes.
So those guys were some of the guys you really looked up to. Was there anybody like a Coach I that was in your wrestling world then?
There really wasn't. We had an assistant coach named Todd Sabo, and Todd was a hard-nosed fella. Sure. I mean, he was tough. I don't know if he was ever a great wrestler, but he was tough as nails. And one day he uncovered my lack of willingness to work hard. He found it. He opened the door and he revealed it. And he tormented me. Wow. And got in my face. And, so he did change some things, because he said, do you have any idea how good you could be if you would actually try? Yeah. Yeah. And so that made an impact that stayed with me. But then, the darndest thing happened. So Ohio State let go their wrestling coach. Right. Who had been there for many years, and they brought in a top-notch
silver medalist
staff. Right. So Russ Hellickson was a silver medalist in the Olympics. Yeah. And he brought with him Doug Blubaugh, who was a hero of mine, because I used to go to his summer camp, and I never met anybody like Doug. Doug taught me so much.
Well, Olympic gold medalist.
Yeah, 1960 gold medalist.
The Russian.
He did beat the Russians, but he beat the 6-time world champion from Iran.
Oh, it was Iran?
Habibi.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Doug used to walk around telling anybody who would listen, you know who the toughest kids are in this country? These little Jewish kids from Beechwood.
I love it.
Right?
I love it.
So he had some kind of, good feelings toward us.
We could not attract more antithesis of what a Beechwood kid was in our wrestling world. The typical Beechwood kid was not that.
Right. No, you're
right. We attracted this.
We were something different.
It was just such a different animal. And it was lovely. It was wonderful.
So the fact that Doug was going to be there, I mean, Russ Hellickson, that was a draw, but I don't think it was enough to take me out of it. So my it would have been my redshirt freshman year at Toledo. Yes. So I was in the match to make nationals and got beat by a kid that had beaten me twice earlier in the year, and I closed the gap tremendously. Sure. He beat me the first time we wrestled like 14-2. Wow. And then the second time he beat me, I think like 9-3, 9-4. And then he beat me 16-14. Wow. And I was coming on. If I got in the finals, I would have wrestled a kid named Darren Mossing, who I'd pinned in our dual meet. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he was a tough kid, and he was. So also,
you were right there.
I was right there. I was right there as a freshman.
Sure, yeah.
And my first year in the lineup, and then I told our coach that I was transferring to Ohio State, and it didn't go over well at all. Right. At some point, maybe 3 or 4 matches into the season, the coach came to me and he told me that he had some money for me. Oh, wow. And so, and he put me on scholarship. And so that was,
so that's got to be
a big deal.
Yeah, it's a tough thing for a coach to hear that now a kid that you put on scholarship is moving to another rival, in-state rival.
Right, I guess so.
So what did you learn from that experience? And then what did you learn at Ohio State when you transferred? I know that obviously we're getting to you transferring to Ohio State.
Right, so, well, let's transfer and then maybe we'll recap a little bit.
All right, very good.
So I think, when I transferred, I was really excited to transfer. I was really looking forward to Ohio State. just being with Blue Ball was going to be enough, you know. And then
also
Jim Jordan was part of that staff. He was going to be the grad assistant, and he had just won 2 national championships. And
at Wisconsin, right?
Right. And I didn't know him, but I did know Jeff, his younger brother.
Right.
So, but anyways, so Jim was our assistant, and you know, Jim brought a lot of fire with him. He was a very refined, dignified kid.
And at that point, becoming highly religious.
Well, I think who?
Jim Jordan.
Well, I think he always was.
So that's your first taste, maybe, of that?
Could be.
Yeah.
I used to look at him, and I would see question marks floating around his head. I couldn't understand how a guy could be in college and never say a swear word. I mean, he was in grad school, but
right.
But he was in the wrestling room still, and he looked 5 years younger than me, and I had a baby face, right? I mean,
sure.
Jim was like this, this sweet looking thing, he was like this perfectly, carved out guy, and he was so polite, and he was such a gentleman, but, and he was so refined. I mean, he never used any profanity.
Right.
And he was honest as the day was long, and he was a perfect example. But it wasn't a time in my life when I was looking for a role model like that, so I couldn't relate to him.
Right. Plus, you also had some interesting characters on the wrestling team. That were again counterintuitive to Jim Jordan.
Right. So, well, Mark Coleman was one of my closer friends, and
who was the original bar brawler.
Okay.
Basically, right?
Okay. And but you should know, Mark never looked for a fight ever.
Understood.
People always wanted to test their mettle against him, and they never. But
it
never worked out well for him.
He was a magnet to that to some degree.
Yeah, but not because he was hostile
Indeed.
or violent or anything.
Indeed. Well said.
And so I got to spend 3 years in the room with that staff and learned a lot. And
weren't you close with Chris Spielman at that time?
Well, I became close with him.
Okay.
When I got there.
He was a very responsible.
He was
ultimately one of the most responsible guys.
So so if anybody rubbed off on me, maybe it was more Coleman than Spielman.
Exactly.
But if I was going to follow somebody's lead, Spielman was extremely mature, a
Yes.
very responsible guy, very hardworking. Coleman was extremely hardworking,
of course,
but just a lot more
fun loving,
absolutely.
if you will. And
although Spielman did love fun also.
So you've got some major names there: UFC champion, NFL player. In their future, and you're right in the middle of that. So we're going to take a commercial break and come back to that, and let's talk a little bit more about that.
Very good.
Want to thank Serve Pro of Beechwood, our newest sponsor, and Jack Coslin, the owner. They serve all of Northeast Ohio, not just Beechwood. They specialize in disaster cleanup that leaves your home or office like new, like it never happened. Flood and water damage, fire, mold, and they say even blood and guts. Not just any Serve Pro. Seek out Serve Pro of Beechwood. That's Serve Pro Beechwood, Shaker Heights, ClevelandHeights.com, 216-464-4498. Operated by a former All-State wrestler from Beechwood, we love Serve Pro of Beechwood. So you're surrounded by all these all-stars, amazing people, Blue Ball, Hellickson, Spielman, Coleman, Jordan. Wow.
Right.
Tell me what you learned.
Well, there's a lot to learn.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot to learn. But one of the things that I learned was it was very important to me to be the best student.
Okay.
I got to my 5th year at Ohio State. So the upshot was, he said to me, I said, I think I'm in line for a wrestle-off.
Yeah.
And he said, Scott, I appreciate what you've done in the classroom. I appreciate that you've worked so hard to get eligible. He said, but I'm not giving you a wrestle-off.
Wow.
And I said, why? And he said, because Kenny is one of my big recruits.
Yes.
He's having a phenomenal year. He's doing a great job. And he said, you are not part of my future. He is.
Yes.
It was a very candid conversation.
Yes.
And I understood it.
Sure.
Right. And so even though I was really crushed because
Yes.
I'd been there for 3 years.
Yes.
So I wasn't going to get any kind of shot at it. And so, okay, so then what do you do from here?
Yeah.
Right. And so I just decided from that moment on, I was wrestling to become a coach.
Okay.
And I was going to absorb every single lesson that Russ had and Blue Ball had and Jim Jordan had. And I was going to learn how to teach wrestling because I had a brother that was in 8th grade.
Yes.
And I was going to coach him and whoever else happened to be on that team, wherever that was going to be. We didn't know where it was going to be at that time.
Right.
that was the end of my college career.
That's a pretty mature position to take.
Well, I couldn't quit.
Yes.
Because, first of all, I felt like I was an important workout partner for everybody else on the team.
It's interesting, too, because Lee Kemp was on our show, and he talked about that workout partner being one of the most important things in his life.
Yeah.
To be there every day and to give him all and to just challenge him, even though, Kemp beat him a lot.
Right.
Beat him all the time because he was Kemp. But you're right.
Right.
It's an important thing.
And I truly think I would have won the wrestle off.
Okay.
And
it would have been a good story.
I don't know what would have happened.
Yeah.
I think about the Jesse Whitmer story.
Yeah.
And I think what could have been, I don't know if I was at that level, but I will tell you that I did train 2 years later. I worked out with the kid who was second in the world team trials.
Okay.
And at my weight. And I worked out with him one day and, I had my way with him.
Sure.
Again, it was practice, which is a far cry from a match. But,
of course.
But it was something to tell me that I was at least in the ballpark.
You're in the mix.
And so,
you're in the mix.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah. So that transitions you into now a coaching career that really just kind of not so much falls in your lap, but is really fortuitous, I think.
Right. So it was going to happen because my brother was there.
Right.
And so I had to make sure that he was going to reach his potential.
And he was an up-and-coming superstar. I mean, he had some credentials, not the top, but he was right there.
Right. Well, he was in the top 4 in the nationals every year. Top 4 or 6, every year.
Sure.
And so he was a tough kid, but I felt like he was not getting the most out of his wrestling room. There were some great kids in his weight class on his team, and he was better than everybody but one, right. Peter Nathanson. Yeah. And I felt like that was just a formality.
Who could have been arguably the greatest youth wrestler ever.
It certainly could have been. Yeah, could have been. Yeah. And so, but anyway, so we moved forward, and you called me. I don't know if you remember this, but you called me when I was in college, and you told me you were taking over the Beechwood program. And I asked you what program, because we were down to one kid.
Yeah, James Gilmore.
Right, exactly.
Thank you, James Gilmore.
Right. And so, and you said, well, I talked to the athletic director, Bill Schumacher, and he said that if I'm willing to take it over, he'll change his plans for disbanding the program.
Yes.
Okay. And so I said, well, that's great.
And Coach, I thought I was nuts.
Yeah,
in his backyard. He told me you're crazy for doing it. Stay with me at Brush, blah, blah, blah. So, but I said, no, we're going to go do this. And I
right. So you pitched me on being your assistant coach, and I told you no.
Yes.
Because I had this issue with my brother, and
sure.
I couldn't put him into a program that didn't exist at Beechwood.
Right.
Right.
And you going to take him to Orange or something?
So no, really the options were really just Chanel or St. Ed's, and Alan Freed was at St. Ed's.
Right.
So the precedent was already there.
Sure.
It was a tough situation. We fast forward to your third conversation with me, because you were an incredible salesperson, and you said to me, listen, I want you to come to Beechwood.
Right.
And I want you to be my assistant. And I said, so I've thought about it. I could only do it on a couple conditions.
Right.
And I named those conditions, and you said, absolutely, no problem.
Right.
And everybody told me that, when you get involved with Pete, he's always going to tell you that. You can't trust him. So, but I really didn't trust him. But I really did trust funny. You, right? Because I did know you from when I was young.
Right.
And so what that became was, to me, just an amazing, amazing relationship. And as an assistant coach, I learned a ton from you. Our agreement was, number one, you could never pull rank on me. Right. Meaning if I was training kids and you thought we were working too hard, you couldn't pull my plug.
Right.
And I was going to lead the training, and I was going to teach the technique. And you said, why would I bring you in if I'm not going to let you do your thing?
Exactly.
Right. And you said, I'll manage the team, and, I'm going to teach what I want to teach, but it's your show as far as those two components. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And so
hiring a great COO and let him do his work.
Yeah. Well, you did that perfectly. And you were a great father figure to these kids, and you taught me so many lessons. I never had any plans on teaching these kids lessons of life.
Right.
Right. And so that I learned from you, and it was critical for me. Because,
well, I remember one thing you said to me is that you said no adult ever completely or unequivocally trusted me, and you trust me implicitly.
You did.
And you said that changed my thought processes of true adults.
And the fact that you lived up to you did pull rank on me one time.
One time.
Okay. You remember that?
Yeah, I do. Cardinal.
It was a Cardinal, right?
Right?
You made me coach the JV kids.
Yes.
And I had no interest in coaching those kids.
And I feel you, because I didn't either.
Right. Well, that's why you made me.
Right.
I learned a lot about coaching from you.
The life lessons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I took those with me. So when my brother, you told me when I came in that you would coach till my brother graduated, and that would be it. And what I didn't realize at the time, but, came to appreciate, was that you really didn't care that much about having me around, but you knew you could build a program around my brother.
Well, he was a lead dog.
He was.
But you were an amazing part of that, because the kids gravitated towards you in the youth. Those 7th and 8th graders wanted to be you, wanted to be your brother. And, if we could get guys that were just 85% of your brother, 80% of your brother, we got some studs, because we can get guys down to state. And then with the mentality that you brought, we could get those guys as good as possible.
Right.
And that's what happened.
So, and by the time I took over, my feeling was I wanted to create men.
Right.
That were great wrestlers, great men that were great wrestlers. And
right.
So that was what my aim was. And I think we taught those kids. I think, my interactions with those kids was so extensive that they were becoming great men first, and they were becoming great thinkers. I was never great at letting kids think on the mat.
Okay.
I was much better at thinking for them.
Sure.
And being like a stream of consciousness in their ear,
right.
when they were wrestling, and so they could hear me, and I was doing the thinking for them. But
you were inside their head.
But in life,
okay.
I once made a comment to Coach I that I bet you if you took all the wrestling coaches in the country throughout history, there's probably nobody that produced more doctors and lawyers than Coach I.
That's right.
Right?
Or business owners.
Right? And his eyes opened,
his
eyebrows went up, and he was like, wow, I never thought about that.
Right.
And then I thought about my own legacy.
Sure.
I don't have one doctor or lawyer, and I used to preach academics way more than Coach I did.
Yeah, but you got some successful dudes.
So what I have, is I have a bunch of kids that all became successful businessmen.
Right.
Right, in their own way.
Yes, you do.
And so, I mean, really, really high-level businessmen. I taught them how to think like men.
Right.
And how to think in a responsible way, and how to hold themselves accountable.
Sure.
And how to handle pressure.
When I've interviewed some of these guys, they talk about that it's part of being, when they were out on the mat, you were in their head, and that was really something that I wanted to impart in my coaching staff and in the kids I coached. And I think that's really what you're talking about as well.
Right. Well, there's other things too, I heard you interviewed Brian Zaid, and Brian is just one of my favorite people. I just love
really
him.
great intellect.
I have such respect for him, and always did. And he just what he could do to people.
Yeah.
The way he would embarrass them and demoralize them, and the positions he would get them in. I used to sit there with Mark Scripps, my assistant coach. Right. I used to sit there, and I would grab his shoulders and put my face on one of his shoulders, and I would hide. I was so embarrassed for his opponents, right? And I would laugh. I'm like, look what he's doing to him. This is so embarrassing, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, so Brian said a lot of poignant things. I actually wrote some of the things down because I thought he said some very important things. And one of them is that business is just a series of decisions.
Yeah.
Right. And he said,
right.
You hope you get the big ones right.
Sure.
You're not going to get them all right, but you hope you get the big ones right.
Right.
And I was thinking, well, boy, isn't that just life?
Yes.
Right?
It is.
I mean, he constricted it to business.
Of course.
But it really is life. And I think those were the kinds of things that we talked about all the time and worked on, and they came away understanding those things. And so if I had any influence on them, it was in that way. And so,
you taught me too. And although I maybe had this intrinsically, I remember accepting an award for you in 1994 as the coach of the year. I had never felt more pride in my life, more happiness for somebody that was not me, you know what I mean?
Right,
right. That you won that award. And I remember talking to Coach I about that because he was with me. So you taught me a life lesson there of this true selflessness of what we do and why we do it. and the happiness that we can have for others as a coach in a life of service. Gabriel Dean talked about that. He says, I'm going to live my life in a life of service. And today you're a doctor. Obviously, you're serving people's health and you're coaching. What's the biggest life lesson that you learned out of all this conversation we've had today, of all the things that you've grown to and grown into?
Well, okay, so first of all, I would say that life is a lesson.
Well said.
Right? And so it's very important to understand that everything you're going to go through is there to teach you. And one of the things that I've tried to teach all the wrestlers throughout the years, and I used to say this to them all the time, was that everything that comes your way is neutral.
Well said.
Everything.
Yes.
It is only positive or negative based on how you process it.
Right.
Now, having grown and aged and become a little more religious, and so if you believe there's a creator, right? If you know there's a creator, so then you can easily understand that he's not going to do anything to harm you. Everything that comes your way is an opportunity.
Okay.
Right? And so everything is for your good.
Gotcha.
And so when I look at the biggest lesson, all the difficulty when I had my freshman year at Toledo, where I couldn't be successful at any level.
Yeah.
And then I ran into some anti-Semitism, which was really uncomfortable at certain times. It wasn't so much from the wrestlers, actually, as it was in the dorm,
Right.
but it did spill over. And then, transferring and knowing that I had a coach that really hated me from that point on at Toledo,
Sure.
and he was still civil with me when I would see him, but I knew how he felt. And then going to Ohio State and never really getting in the lineup, I probably had 75 to 100 matches in open tournaments.
Yes.
But never really got to see what I really could accomplish, and certainly never met any of my goals at Ohio State.
Right.
But when you come away from it all, in each one of those challenges that you face at that time, you can't let it get you down. You have to recognize, okay, this is an opportunity for growth.
Okay.
This is an opportunity for me to get better, for me to learn from it.
Right.
You have to always, to think of glass half empty or half full. Your glass is full.
Oh, yeah.
Period. Always.
Wow.
You can drink that whole glass and it's still full.
Right.
Right. And you should always take it with you everywhere. That no matter what frustration you face at that moment, whatever difficulty, whatever heartache, you have to know that no matter what the circumstance is, there are lessons in there, and those are opportunities for us to grow and to grow stronger and bigger and better, and we can handle the next challenge better. And I think that is the lesson that people have to take with them through life, because if you do, you can always have a positive mental attitude. You can always be driven towards your goals. Sure. And the setbacks aren't setbacks. They're just challenges to overcome.
I love that. So embrace that.
Absolutely.
Embrace it. Our boy Stallone says it's not getting knocked down, it's how you get up.
Yeah.
And I love that too. And I love your philosophy. Love you as a human being.
Love you too, my friend.
And I am so blessed to have had you in studio for a two-parter.
Yeah.
A two-parter, man. And
well, you're my blood.
Well, you too, maybe. Yeah. But, and I understand that anti-Semitism is poignant. I know that, it's just a sad thing that we have to experience.
And again, it wasn't a lot. Well, at least I wasn't aware of it a lot.
And that, granted, it was kind of the Stone Age, 1975, but at the end of the day, that's something that, we gotta figure it out.
Right.
Figure
Listen,
out.
but again, those all just are challenges. Right?
Exactly.
If I fold the tent, right, and walk away from it, then I don't grow from it. But if I take it and say, listen, okay, there's people, and today my feelings about that have totally changed.
Of course.
Like my feelings today are, you know what? Like in this country now, we're so politically correct that we're trying to tell people how they can feel about, if you want to hate me because I'm a Jew, it's okay. You can't hurt me, but you can hate me, and I'm okay with that. Yeah. And I know it's only because you haven't gotten to know me.
Exactly.
Right? Once you get to know me, you're really going to hate me. A whole new level of hatred. Right?
That's right.
The fact that you only hate me.
That's right.
No, but the truth is, I feel like the people that, there was an assistant coach at Chanel.
Okay.
That I felt like every time we looked at each other, we just gave each other dirty looks over the years, right?
Of course.
And I would sit down with Graham Coggill at tournaments and with Tim Rutherford at tournaments and have conversations with them for hours on end, right? I mean, I had so much love for them. But this guy, I had no relationship with him. He's just a couple years older than me, and he was a stud for them. And And it was Larry Vance. I'll say
course.
it because,
Yeah.
you know, you and
Well,
I were
now
having,
we-
you and I were having coffee one day, and
Yes.
in walks Larry Vance.
Yes.
And you're like, wave to him. I turn around, I see him. I'm like, oh my gosh, is he going to come over to the table, right?
Yeah, 4 hours later, we were best friends.
Right. So
Yeah.
we sat there for an hour and a half and
Yeah.
schmoozed. And I mean, what a great guy. I mean,
Terrific guy. That's the reason I had Jake Goodwin for 2 years because of Larry Vance.
Oh, really?
He saw my dad at Home Depot, and
And here was a guy
that.
that, you know, so I had no love for this guy for all
Right.
these years. Like, how could you be Graham Coggill's assistant and have nothing to say to me?
Yeah.
Because I have such love and respect for Graham, right?
Sure.
And so, but nothing, not a word was spoken between us for all those years of competition, you know, between us. And then one day in a coffee shop, right?
Yeah.
He sits down with us, and I'm like, oh, that's really a great guy.
So the lesson that we take away is just get to know people.
Right. And you know what? But the truth is, I think for me, the bigger thing is, you know, we shouldn't fill our hearts with hate, right?
Yeah.
Fill your heart with love and judge everybody favorably. But more importantly, it's okay to have aggressive feelings towards somebody. It's okay to, you know, like exercise some self-control and self-restraint. You know, one last thought before you sign off. You taught me a lesson when we were coaching. You know, I said, you taught me so many things. You taught me something that's stuck with me through my entire professional career. You said this was in 1988.
Okay.
I was probably 21, 22 years old. And we were having a conversation about business. And you said, you know, Scott, something very important to take through life with you is that there's some things you don't do even for money.
Right.
And
Right.
I didn't really know the context you were saying it, like while you were telling me that. I wasn't in business at the time. And I was, I was actually I think I was in law school at the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't see how it applied.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that I've taken that with me everywhere I've gone. And so that is something that keeps you honest in your business transactions. You know?
Sure.
And so I thank you for that.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you. I love you. We are blood. This is Coach Cimoroni. Love and health to all.
I want to share my thought of the day with you. Iron through fire makes steel. Welcome the fire. Want to thank Brandon and his team at Edwin's Leadership and Restaurant Institute, our newest sponsor. What a marvelous mission. Thank you, Brandon, for bringing these wonderful people back into productive society at Edwin's Leadership and Restaurant Institute. Visit them at 13101 Shaker Square, Edwin's Restaurant. Thank you.